Figuring out how to edit videos faster has kind of been the key thing to actually getting me posting consistently across platforms. And this is how I do it. What I basically do is have Claude edit for me. It's not totally automated because every video is different, and honestly, I like to add my human touches at the end. But honestly, Claude is able to get me 85% of the way there in just a few minutes. So you can try to do it directly in chat. I don't like to do that because then every time I want to preview an edit or change something about my edit, I have to wait for it to completely re-render like an entire MP4. And so as the engineer that I am, I made my own. It's called Daydream, and it's essentially like if CapCut or Adobe Premiere were connected to Claude or ChatGPT or whatever tool you use, so that it can actually control your screen and edit things for you. But these are 3 things that you can bring to your projects today to help you save hours in editing. So the first is using AI to clean up your talking head. If you're like me, this is always the most boring and time-consuming part of any edit, especially if I'm editing one of my own videos and I have to hear my voice over and over again. But luckily, there are a lot of ways for Claude to actually speed this up for us. So the first thing that I like to do is actually just have Claude clean up my footage. So typically, I'll start off by asking it to remove my pauses and duplicate takes. This essentially prompts Claude to transcribe your footage, and then it'll read through that transcription, find all of those pauses and duplicate takes, and it'll essentially leave the last or the most complete take. For me, that's already huge, starting from a pretty clean cut. But from here, I typically can do several different things. First is I can actually review everything it cut and see if I want to make any changes. I just need to toggle on show cuts, and then I can see everything it cut out, and then I can easily bring something back or remove something if I want to. And honestly, that's a great start, but sometimes I'll actually have it take it one step further and do another cut. This is where if you have a video brief, you can actually just paste that in and it will read through that and automatically do a second round of cuts. If it's more of a rough brief, it might be good to first discuss it a bit with Claude just to align on the right narrative for the video. But if it's an outline or even a cleaned up script, you can just put that in and it'll do a pretty good job matching that cut. And then the other thing I like to do sometimes with talking heads is if I have a really long talking head or if it's an interview, sometimes I'll actually be trying to take highlights from that and convert it into shorts. And Claude actually does a pretty good job with this. Sometimes I like to align on how many shorts we're gonna do and what the concept is per short. But from there, it'll actually cut it up and put each short into a new project so that we can keep editing them individually. But the second way I like to use AI for video editing is actually to have Claude find and match B-roll for me. So what happens in Daydream is when you import clips as footage, it'll actually go ahead and process it. And what it's essentially doing is it's pretty much just indexing it so it knows what actually happens in the video and when, so that later when you reference something, it'll be able to search through that information and find that clip and add it in. I end up using this a bunch of different ways. Sometimes I'll have a bunch of different product screen recordings, and then I will process that. And then when I'm actually editing, I'll just have Claude match my voiceover with the different clips from my screen recordings. And honestly, that's pretty great. Sometimes I need to adjust the start and end times just to make sure that everything flows pretty well. But honestly, it gets me pretty close. And then the other thing that I like to do with this is just have Claude create some fast montages for me at times. I've been chatting with some real estate folks lately, and something that they like to do a lot are listing videos for social. One thing I like to do for that is just take all of the footage for the house or the listing and process all of that. And then I'll just have Claude add a bunch of fast clips showing the house. If there's something in particular, it's nice to also just mention it. So sometimes I'll be oh, make sure you include that clip showing off the slide in the house. And then Claude will know to just go and find that particular clip and add it in. But from that first cut, it's a pretty good starting point for you to then move things around or add or remove particular clips. And then the last way I've been using AI today is to actually have it help me add images or add custom motion graphics to fill in my timeline. Sometimes I just feel I need that something else on the screen. You have your talking head, sometimes you have B-roll, sometimes you might even have a different angle for your talking head, but sometimes you just need that one other thing, or maybe it's that you're talking about an abstract concept and it's just nice to have some sort of visualization of it. And in those cases, it's really nice to just have Claude pull me some images or to have it create a bespoke motion graphic sort of visualizing the concept that I'm saying. And so I'll actually end up using this in a bunch of different places. Like I do a lot of animated titles for things when I'm trying to emphasize specific things. But like I said, if I'm like doing an explainer video or I'm trying to explain like an abstract concept, I like to also put in a motion graphic to just visualize what I'm saying. But graphics is actually an area where I feel like Claude can actually do quite a bit, because behind these motion graphics, what it's doing is it's essentially writing code, and Claude is really good at that. So it can pretty much do some really complex things. But I do also think this is one of those areas where you kind of get out what you put into it. So like for graphics in particular, it might be good to provide like branding information with colors and fonts. And I also think it's just good to be like more descriptive here about what specifically you're looking for if you have that in mind. But once you do set that up, like you do end up with some really cool effects, like things that I would have like no idea how to do otherwise. Okay, minor set change because it just got too bright over there. But what I was saying is that from there, you can like iterate with Claude, but once you get it to a good point, you can export. I typically just export as video because honestly, I just like things super simple, but you can also export it as a XML, like a timeline that you can then import into DaVinci or Final Cut or whatever video editors you already use, if you already have like a setup that you want to continue editing with there. But the last thing that I like to do that I just wanted to call out is because I make so many different videos, like for YouTube and for like my social channels, and like sometimes I'll even like help friends edit videos. What I like to do to save me time in the future is that when I have an edit that I do like and I think I will want to use it again in the future, I like to save that as a starting point for my next video. And the way to do that here is with skills. Skills are essentially like saved instructions for Claude. And so what I'll do is I'll actually have Claude review the session where we edited, and then I'll have it like create its own instructions and save that as a skill. And so in those instructions, it will save like, oh, first we cleaned the duplicate takes and the pauses, and then like we added B-roll. It'll list out all of those steps that we took for that edit, so that next time when that skill is invoked, it'll try to take all of those same steps. So this is really great to like save different elements of your style, or if I'm like doing a series on Instagram, for example, making sure that like every series starts with like that same intro. And then what I'll typically do is the next time that I edit using that skill, after I finish that video, I'll actually have Claude then go back in and reflect on our session and like what's in that saved skill file, and update it with like any learnings that we had from editing the video so that we can save that for the next time, if that makes sense. But yeah, this has honestly saved me so much time while editing, and honestly let me focus on more of like the creative parts of editing versus like manually cutting out all of like the silences or like scrubbing through to like find specific clips to add in. It's like the only way that I have managed to consistently put out content while I still like have the normal job things that I need to do, like 9 to 5, and even sometimes like help my friends edit a video or two. But I hope that was helpful for you too. I hope you give it a try, but let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.